You must be in the wrong room." The words sliced through the thick Monday morning silence like a blade. Mr. Bradley Coleman didn't even look up from his attendance sheet when he said it. His voice was flat, controlled, but loud enough that every student in room 204 turned their head toward the door. There stood Jordan Miles, 17, tall, lean, black, backpack slung over one shoulder, dark blue hoodie zipped up halfway, a clean notebook clutched in his hand. He didn't speak right away, just blinked slowly. The corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly, amused, maybe, or unimpressed. "This is AP U.S. History, right?" Jordan asked, voice calm. Coleman finally looked up. He narrowed his eyes like Jordan had just insulted his intelligence. "This is my class," he said, placing heavy emphasis on the possessive. "Advanced placement. Juniors and seniors only. You shouldn't be here." A few students exchanged looks. Some stared at their desks. Emma Collins, 16, blonde, sharp as a blade, shifted in her seat. Her fingers clenched around her pen. "I'm on the roster," Jordan replied. "I can show you." Coleman stood slowly, closing the attendance book with a loud snap. "Show me," he echoed, taking a few steps toward the door. "Let me guess. Guidance council made a mistake, right? Happens all the time. But I don't have time to babysit misplaced students, especially ones who clearly aren't prepared for this level." "Prepared?" Jordan repeated. His face remained neutral, but his eyes, dark, steady, didn't waver. "You haven't asked me a single question. You don't know anything about me." "I know what I see," Coleman snapped. "And what I see is someone out of place." Another pause. Jordan's eyes scanned the room. 22 students. Most white, a few Latino, 2 black students, including himself. He nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. "Would you like to see my transcript?" he asked. "Or maybe the principal's note?" "Don't get smart with me," Coleman snapped. He turned to the class. "You all see this? This is what happens when people think they can just walk in and take a spot they haven't earned." A couple students chuckled nervously. No one looked at Jordan. Emma stared straight at Coleman, her jaw tight. "Mr. Coleman," she started quietly. "Stay out of it, Emma," he said without looking at her. "This doesn't concern you." "But he hasn't done anything wrong," she said. Her voice was still soft, but her hands trembled in her lap. "He literally just walked in and said his name." "And that's enough," Coleman replied. "Tone, attitude, entitlement, it's all there. I've seen this before. They come in thinking they're going to challenge authority. Disrespect the structure we built here." "I didn't say anything disrespectful," Jordan said. His voice was still maddeningly calm. "I just said I'm in the right class." "You don't tell me what's right," Coleman barked. His face was turning red. "This classroom runs on order and respect, and if you can't follow that, there's the door." He pointed. "You can take your things and go down to the counselor's office." Jordan didn't move. "So I'm not allowed to sit down?" "You're not allowed to challenge me on day one. That's not how this works." "You challenge me first," Jordan said, evenly. Coleman's nostrils flared. He looked at the class again, as if expecting their support, but the silence was thick. The kind of silence that smells like fear. "You want to stay?" Coleman said after a beat. "Fine. Let's make it fair." He walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. "Pop quiz. Right now. 1 question. Get it right, you stay. Get it wrong, you leave. Deal." "That's not fair," Emma said. "You've never done that to anyone." "It's my class, my rules," Coleman said. "I don't need permission to keep my standards high." Jordan looked at the board, then back at Coleman. "You sure that's how you want to do this?" Coleman smiled. It wasn't kind. "Absolutely." He turned to the board and scrawled, "Name 3 significant causes of the War of 1812 and explain their geopolitical implications in under 2 minutes." He stepped aside. "Clock's ticking," he said. Jordan stepped forward. He didn't take out a book, didn't glance at a phone, just looked at the board, then started. "The War of 1812 was driven by British impressment on American sailors, restrictions on U.S. trade due to Britain's ongoing war with France, and the American desire to expand territory into native-held lands. Coleman's smirk faltered slightly. Jordan continued, voice clear. Impressment violated U.S. sovereignty and humiliated the young nation. Trade restrictions crippled American merchants, especially in the Northeast. And expansionism was tied to a growing sense of manifest destiny, even before the term was coined. It also led to heightened conflict with native tribes, many of whom were supported by Britain. Together, these factors created pressure for war from both economic and nationalistic fronts. He finished. Dead silence. Coleman blinked once. Then again. That was rehearsed, he muttered. I study, Jordan said simply. Coleman cleared his throat. Fine. Sit down. For now. Jordan walked slowly to the only open desk, second row, third from the window. As he sat, several students watched him, then turned quickly back to their notebooks. Coleman looked disoriented. Let's begin, he said finally, flipping open his textbook. But his voice had lost its sharp edge. Something in the room had shifted. Emma looked over at Jordan. He didn't smile, but he gave her a small nod. The next 40 minutes dragged. Coleman's lecture was mechanical, interrupted by long pauses and distracted glances toward Jordan, who sat motionless, taking precise notes. The energy in the room had changed. Fear hadn't vanished, but it had been challenged. The bell rang. Students filed out. Some whispered. Others avoided eye contact. Emma stayed behind, hesitating by her desk. Jordan didn't move. Coleman packed his bag without looking at either of them. That was brave, Emma said quietly. Jordan finally looked at her. He's done it before? She nodded. A lot, especially with kids like you. Jordan didn't seem surprised. Just thoughtful. Thanks for speaking up. She shrugged. Most of them won't, but someone has to. He nodded. Someone will. She paused. You talk like you've been through this before. Jordan stood up, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. I've seen worse. She studied him. Who are you, really? His eyes met hers. Calm. Direct. Just a student. For now. Then he left. Emma turned slowly toward the door. Bradley stood frozen behind his desk, staring at the empty seat Jordan had occupied. His fingers were clenched tight around his coffee mug. Cold now, tasteless. Power, it seemed, was starting to slip through his hands. And he didn't yet understand why. The next morning, room 204 was unusually quiet, even for first period. The overhead lights flickered slightly, casting a sterile, uneven glow across the worn wooden desks and scuffed tile floor. Bradley Coleman entered exactly 2 minutes before the bell, as always, with his usual cup of coffee and tightly pressed shirt. But something about his stride had changed. It was tighter, less commanding. He didn't make eye contact with anyone as he walked to his desk. He just placed the mug down, opened the attendance book, and cleared his throat. Let's get started. His voice lacked its usual bite. Across the room, Jordan Miles sat in the same desk he had claimed the day before. His posture was upright, notebook open, pen in hand, eyes calm and unwavering. Emma Collins glanced at him once, subtly. There was a mutual awareness now, an unspoken understanding that something significant had shifted in the classroom dynamic, even if most of the students couldn't yet name it. Today, we continue our discussion on early American expansionism and its intersection with native resistance movements, Bradley said, avoiding Jordan's side of the room entirely. Open your books to page 124. Pages rustled, chairs squeaked. Bradley began his lecture, voice steady but hollow, reciting facts with the mechanical rhythm of someone desperately trying to return to normal. But the students noticed. They noticed the way he skipped over opportunities for interaction, how he avoided cold calling anyone the way he usually did, especially Jordan. For years, his classes were built on intimidation. The threat of public embarrassment kept students compliant. Now that power felt interrupted. Midway through the lesson, Jordan raised his hand. Bradley paused. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing just slightly. Yes, he said curtly. You mentioned Tecumseh's alliance with the British, Jordan said. But didn't the U.S. government use that as justification to expand further west after the war? I mean, they framed it as a defensive move, but wasn't it more about seizing land? A pause. Several students looked up, surprised, not just by the question, but by the clarity, the confidence, the refusal to shrink. Bradley opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's a perspective, he said finally. We try to avoid politicizing curriculum. But history is political, Jordan replied, especially when people use it to justify taking someone else's land. A murmur moved through the class. Emma stared at Bradley. The tension in the room grew tight enough to snap. That will be enough commentary for today, Bradley said stiffly. Let's move on. Jordan nodded once, no trace of emotion on his face, but his question lingered in the air like smoke. After class, Bradley didn't dismiss the students with his usual bark. He just sat down and watched them file out in silence. Jordan walked out last. As he passed the desk, he met Bradley's eyes briefly. That same calm stare. Measuring, watching. Bradley didn't say a word, but his fingers twitched slightly on the desk. The rest of the day, the incident spread through the halls. Emma overheard it at lunch, in the bathroom, even in the library. Did you see how the new kid stood up to Coleman? He's fearless. He made the guy sweat. But there was another side, the whispers too. Some students didn't like the disruption. He's just looking for attention. Think he's better than us or something. He's got a chip on his shoulder. Emma kept quiet. She knew how fast things could turn. That night, Bradley sat alone in his living room, staring at his laptop. The screen displayed an email thread with Vice Principal Rebecca Harper. No subject line. No clear accusations. Just a message from her office reminding all staff about the district's ongoing commitment to equity in education and inclusive practices. It wasn't a warning. Not officially. But it didn't have to be. Bradley took a long sip from his whiskey glass and stared at the ceiling. He'd taught at Jefferson High for 23 years. He knew how to read subtext. Someone was watching, and he had a sinking suspicion he knew exactly who. On Wednesday, Jordan stayed late after class. Emma did too. They didn't speak at first, just packed their things slowly as Bradley graded papers at his desk, eyes flickering up every few seconds. Can I ask you something? Emma said finally. Jordan looked over. Sure. Why here? Jefferson's not exactly welcoming to people who speak out. Jordan shrugged. That's kind of the point. She tilted her head. That's not really an answer. He studied her for a moment. Do you ever feel like something's wrong, but everyone's pretending it's fine? She blinked. All the time. Then you understand. You don't act like someone who's scared of getting in trouble. I'm not. You should be. Bradley cut in, voice sharp. Both students looked at him. Your tone, your interruptions, your attitude. It's disruptive, he continued. You're setting a bad example. Jordan's expression didn't change. For asking questions? For challenging authority. For making other students uncomfortable. Emma opened her mouth, but Jordan spoke first. What exactly about my questions makes people uncomfortable? Don't play coy, Bradley snapped. You think you're clever, but you're not. You're manipulative. You're trying to paint me as the enemy. Are you? Jordan asked quietly. The question landed like a punch. Bradley's face flushed. You can get out, he said. Right now. Jordan stared at him for a moment, then stood. It's okay, he said to Emma. I'll see you tomorrow. He walked out slowly, his steps unhurried. The door clicked shut behind him. Emma turned to Bradley, who now looked shaken. You know he's right, she said. Bradley didn't respond, just looked at the empty desk again. That night, Bradley sent another email, this time directly to the vice principal, a formal complaint. Student displays chronic insolence, refuses direction, undermines classroom order. He used words like combative, disruptive, inappropriate, but the reply he received the next morning chilled him to the bone. We are aware of the situation. Please continue as normal. Do not take any further disciplinary action without prior approval. Approval? Since when did he need permission to run his own class? Thursday morning, Jordan arrived early, already seated when Bradley walked in, already writing, already calm, as if he owned the room. Students trickled in. No one laughed. No one whispered. The atmosphere had changed. Bradley tried to start class like usual, but his words stumbled. His pacing faltered. Jordan raised his hand 3 times, each time with sharp, relevant, uncomfortably pointed questions. Each time, Bradley dodged, avoided, dismissed, but the class noticed. By Friday, the shift was undeniable. More students sat straighter. Emma began speaking up more. Even others, like Sophia Martinez and Leo Carter, joined the discussions. Something had cracked. Room 204 was no longer Bradley's domain alone, and he hated it. During lunch, Bradley cornered Rebecca Harper near the staff lounge. "Why haven't we removed him?" he demanded. "He's undermining my authority." She didn't blink. "Because he hasn't broken any rules. And because, frankly, we're all under review right now. There's been community concern." "Community?" "Bradley," she said, voice low, "you've had complaints filed for years. This time, it's not just whispers. There's a tension, higher than district. So tread carefully." He froze. "What do you mean higher than district?" She didn't answer, just walked away. That night, Bradley barely slept. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece it all together. The calm demeanor, the pointed questions, the perfect transcript, the refusal to react emotionally, and the vice principal's words. Higher than district. What the hell did that mean? And who the hell was Jordan Miles, really? By Monday morning, the tension in room 204 felt like humidity, thick, invisible, settling into everyone's skin. Students walked in quieter than usual, sensing something was coming even if they couldn't name it. Emma sat near the window, pretending to reorganize her notes while actually watching the door. Jordan was already there, calm as ever, writing something in a small black notebook she'd never seen before. Bradley Coleman entered last. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles under his eyes, a stiffness in his jaw, a tremor in his hand as he set his coffee on the desk. He didn't greet the class, didn't straighten the worksheets, didn't even open the attendance book. He just stared at Jordan, and for the first time since the boy had entered his classroom, the fear wasn't on the student's side. "Before we begin," Bradley said, voice hoarse, "I need to address an issue." The room froze instantly. Jordan didn't look up. He just finished his sentence, closed the notebook, and finally raised his eyes with a calmness that looked like confidence or strategy. "There's been a pattern," Bradley continued, "a deliberate attempt to undermine my authority. Some students here seem to think they can challenge me, question me, disrupt the environment I've built over decades." Emma tensed. Sophia and Leo exchanged confused looks. Bradley stepped forward. "Jordan Miles, stand up." The room erupted in whispers. Jordan rose slowly, expression unreadable. "You have been disrespectful, confrontational, and manipulative," Bradley said, pointing a shaking finger at him. "I believe you came into my classroom with the intention to provoke, and I'm not going to let you derail everything we've worked for here. So you are suspended from my class until further notice." Gasps spread across the room. Emma stood. "You can't do that," she snapped. "He didn't do anything wrong." Bradley spun toward her. "Sit down, Emma." "No," she said. "You're scared of him. That's what this is." I said sit, but the door opened, and everything stopped. 3 people walked in. Vice Principal Rebecca Harper stepped inside first, her expression solemn. Behind her were 2 strangers, a man and a woman, both wearing dark suits, carrying government-issued folders clipped under their arms. The man spoke first. "Good morning. My name is Agent Mark Reynolds." The woman stepped forward. "And I'm Agent Alicia Porter." A hush swept over the room. "We're with the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights." Bradley froze. Pale, silent. The students stared wide-eyed. Some sat straighter. Others looked terrified. Emma looked at Jordan, but he wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Reynolds continued. "We're here to conduct an unannounced audit regarding allegations of discriminatory practices in Jefferson High School." Bradley swallowed. This is a misunderstanding." "Actually," Agent Porter interrupted, "we have been monitoring reports from this school for over a year." She turned to the class. Several of you submitted anonymous complaints to the district's online civil rights portal. Your testimonies have been reviewed. Patterns were identified. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had sent one. Months ago. She never thought anyone would read it. Bradley turned toward her, wide-eyed. You. She shook her head, both terrified and relieved. This isn't about me. Agent Reynolds opened a folder. Mr. Coleman, in particular, has been named repeatedly in complaints involving hostile classroom environments, selective discipline, and race-based academic gatekeeping. Bradley stammered. That's outrageous. I maintain high standards. We are very aware of your standards, Porter said flatly. She stepped aside. Jordan. Every head snapped toward him. Jordan didn't look shocked, didn't flinch, didn't pretend to be confused. He stepped forward, calmly, deliberately, and stood beside the agents. Emma's heart pounded. Her breath caught. The entire class seemed frozen in time, realizing what was happening 1 second too late. Agent Porter continued. Students, faculty, Mr. Coleman, Jordan Miles is not an ordinary student. The room held its breath. He is a federal student civil rights monitor, assigned to evaluate teacher conduct, gather first-hand evidence, and report discriminatory behavior for legal review. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Then the whispers began, soft, rising, uncontrollable. What? He was a monitor? Oh, my God. Emma covered her mouth. Not in shock. No, she had suspected something was off, but in awe. Jordan stepped forward, standing tall, his voice calm and unwavering. Everything you've done since I walked into this room has been documented, he said to Bradley. Your assumptions, your intimidation strategies, your refusal to treat students equally. Every word, every tone, every attempt to push me out. Bradley stumbled backward, hitting the edge of his desk. You set me up. No, Jordan replied. You set yourself up. I gave you every opportunity to treat me like any other student. You chose not to. I want a lawyer. I want the union. You'll have both, Agent Reynolds said, during the formal investigation. But right now, we need you to step outside with us. There are several matters that require immediate review. The class watched as Bradley looked around the room. The students he had intimidated for years, the ones who never challenged him, the ones he punished, the ones he dismissed, all staring back at him, not afraid anymore. For the first time, he looked small. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jordan held his gaze without blinking, without anger, without satisfaction, just resolve. Let's go, Agent Porter said. And Bradley Coleman, former ruler of room 204, walked out, escorted by federal agents, while 23 stunned students watched through the glass door. The moment the door closed, the room exhaled at once. Chairs creaked. Papers shifted. Someone whispered, "Holy," but didn't finish. Emma stepped toward Jordan. So her voice shook. You knew. All this time. Jordan nodded once. I've been assigned to this district for months. Jefferson High had one of the highest complaint rates in the state, but we needed first-hand evidence. She stared at him. You weren't scared. I wasn't here to be scared, he said. I was here to be a witness. The class began to gather around, slowly, cautiously, like animals approaching sunlight after a long night. Sophia asked, So what happens now? Jordan looked at the empty desk at the front of the room, the desk Bradley had ruled from like a throne. Now, he said quietly, we rebuild this place, and we make sure none of you ever get treated like that again. Emma watched him, understanding now why he seemed so composed, why nothing rattled him, why he looked at Bradley the way he did. Jordan wasn't just a student. He wasn't just a witness. He was the moment the entire school finally changed direction. And room 204 would never be the same again. The days following Bradley Coleman's removal moved both too fast and too slow. On one hand, the halls of Jefferson High buzzed with conversation. Rumors morphed into headlines. Someone posted a blurry photo of Coleman being escorted out, clipboard under one arm, face pale, sweat on his brow, and it spread like wildfire across every student's phone. The caption read simply, Justice, finally. On the other hand, room 204 became a strange kind of vacuum. The substitute assigned, Ms. Callahan, was polite, soft-spoken, and clearly overwhelmed by the weight of what had just happened in that classroom. She taught from the book, avoided eye contact with Jordan, and seemed eager to keep things quiet, controlled. No one challenged her. No one dared. Because even though Coleman was gone, the residue of his reign still clung to the desks and the walls like an old stain. Emma noticed how students looked around before raising their hands now, as if checking for permission, how some of them still flinched when called upon. Years of silent discipline didn't just evaporate in a week. Jordan didn't speak much either. He sat in his usual seat, took notes, observed, but his presence had shifted. The secret was out. He was no longer just a calm, smart new kid. He was a catalyst, the mirror, the one who'd forced a reckoning. Some students admired him. Others avoided him. A few still whispered that he'd gone too far, that he'd ruined a man's career. Emma heard one boy mutter, "Snitch," under his breath as Jordan walked by. But Jordan never reacted. He just kept moving forward. Emma, on the other hand, couldn't stay silent. "You think he ruined something?" she snapped at the boy. "That man humiliated students for years. You were just too scared to notice." The boy didn't respond. He walked away. She didn't care. Because now, things were different, and she wasn't going to let them slip back into silence. That Friday, during lunch, Rebecca Harper called Jordan into her office. She offered him a chair, closed the blinds, sat down across from him with a sigh. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "See how you're doing. I know this kind of work. It takes a toll." Jordan nodded. "It's not about me." "Still," she said, folding her hands, "you've been under a microscope. I imagine not all the students are reacting well. They're adjusting. You did something important here." Jordan looked at her carefully. "Did you know? Before I arrived?" A pause. Then, "No, not officially, but I suspected something was coming. When I started receiving emails from the OCR with warnings and training requirements, I figured someone was about to pull the curtain back. And yet Coleman stayed for years. We're not proud of that." Her voice softened. "But we're trying to move forward now. You helped make that possible." Jordan said nothing. The room felt heavy, as if loaded with truths still sitting in the corners. "You're leaving after the semester, right?" she asked. He nodded. "My report is nearly complete. This site was one of the final cases in our regional audit. Will we see it?" "Eventually, there will be a public version." "And the students?" she asked. "What happens to them?" Jordan looked down at the folder on his lap. "That depends on what you do next." She nodded, thoughtful. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "Of course. Do you ever get tired of watching people fail the test?" Jordan exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I don't see it as a test. I see it as a mirror. I don't control what people show me. They choose." After he left her office, Jordan walked the halls like someone saying goodbye. He paused by the trophy case near the gym, by the mural of former principals, by the worn-out banners that still hung from the ceiling, boasting championships from years no one remembered. He saw students differently now, not as suspects, not as victims, but as inheritors. What came next would be up to them. On Monday, Emma found a letter on her desk, folded in thirds. No name on it, just one word on the outside. "You." She unfolded it slowly, eyes scanning the neat handwriting. "Emma, thank you for seeing clearly before anyone else did. People like you are why this work matters. Don't stop speaking up, even when your voice shakes. Especially then. J." She read it twice, folded it back carefully. She didn't show anyone, not because it was a secret, but because it felt like something sacred. The next day, Ms. Callahan asked the class to write an essay titled, "What does justice look like in a classroom?" Most students stared at their papers blankly, unsure how to begin, but Emma's pen moved almost immediately. Words poured out of her like a confession, like a promise. She wrote about silence, about fear, about the slow erosion of confidence when someone in power decides you're not worthy. She wrote about what it felt like to finally be seen, and about how justice wasn't always loud or sudden. Sometimes it was a quiet, calm student walking into a room and refusing to be erased. At the end of the week, a district-wide assembly was held in the gymnasium. Rebecca Harper took the stage. "We're entering a new chapter at Jefferson High," she said. "One where every student has a right to be heard, to be respected, and to be believed. That work starts now, and it starts with us." There was polite applause, but for the first time, it didn't feel forced. It felt possible. That afternoon, Jordan stood outside the school, his black backpack slung over one shoulder, notebook in hand. He watched the buses pull away, watched students laugh and shout, and chase each other across the parking lot like any normal day. Emma approached. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "My report's done. The agents will follow up. But my part here is over." "It doesn't feel like it." "That's because your part is just beginning." She smiled, a little sad, a little proud. "Will you go to another school?" "Probably." "And do it all over again? If they need it." "And what if they don't want it?" "Most don't," he said. "But that's never the point." She looked at him one more time, not as the mystery student, not as a federal monitor, but as someone who had taken the worst kind of silence and turned it into a wake-up call. "Take care of this place," he said. "It's yours now." Then he turned and walked down the sidewalk, disappearing into the early autumn haze, leaving behind a classroom no longer ruled by fear, and a school on the edge of becoming something better. 3 months later, room 204 didn't look that different. The desks were still old, the walls still beige, and the same flickering light still buzzed faintly near the back corner. But the energy in the room had shifted, subtly but undeniably. The silence that once echoed with fear was now filled with voices. Not loud, not chaotic, but alive. Students asked questions without looking over their shoulders. They disagreed without fear of punishment. They laughed without flinching. Emma Collins sat in her usual seat, but now she leaned in during discussions, challenged ideas, led study groups. She had grown into a quiet leader, not because someone gave her permission, but because she finally believed she didn't need it. Sophia Martinez had joined the Student Equity Council. Leo Carter signed up for debate club. Ms. Callahan, once nervous and hesitant, had settled into the role of full-time teacher. She had shifted her approach. Less lectures, more dialogue. Less control, more connection. One afternoon, while handing back graded essays, she paused at Emma's desk. "Can I show you something?" she asked. Emma nodded. Ms. Callahan reached into her folder and pulled out a single-page memo. It was from the district superintendent's office, a formal announcement that Jefferson High had been selected to pilot a new equity and inclusion program across all public schools in the county. "It started here," she said, "in this room." Emma held the paper for a long moment, feeling the weight of it. It didn't erase what had happened, but it meant something had changed, and that change had rippled outward. Later that week, as Emma walked through the main hallway, she paused in front of the newly framed photo hanging near the entrance. It wasn't a trophy or a portrait of a former principal. It was a black and white candid of a classroom mid-discussion. Students engaged, one hand raised, eyes forward. The caption below read, "This is what equity looks like." No names, no dates, just a moment captured and a promise made. Outside, winter had softened the edges of Charlotte. The trees stood bare, the sky pale and overcast. But inside the school, something new had taken root. Jordan Miles didn't return. No one expected him to. But his absence was not a void. It was a reminder of what had been and what could no longer be ignored. His name was never etched on a plaque or announced in assembly, but his legacy lived quietly in the way students now looked each other in the eye, in the way teachers rethought their words, in the way room 204 became more than just a room. It became proof. Justice didn't come with applause. It came with accountability. It came with courage. And it came with students refusing to be invisible. In the final week of the semester, Emma wrote an op-ed for the school paper. It was titled, "What We Learned When We Were Finally Allowed to Speak." It didn't mention Jordan by name. It didn't need to. Those who knew understood. And those who didn't, well, now they had a chance to learn. Because once a room learns to tell the truth, it never fully forgets how. And once a student finds their voice, they never really lose it again.